This is a journey into a world of mystery and deceit, a fantastical place full of UFOs, strange encounters, and stories of alien abduction. My name is Mick Cook. I work for Jane's Information Group, which has reported on defense issues since 1898. I investigate secret military programs worth billions of dollars, but hidden from public view. I dig out evidence of classified technologies developed by the defense industry and concealed behind a network of false trails. It's my job to find out what really has been flying through our airspace. So from time to time, I examine sighting evidence of unidentified flying objects. Do these sightings offer evidence of top-secret military and defense technology, or do they hold clues to something more mysterious? This world is normally off-limits for a journalist. But I want to discover for myself what is real and what is not. On the 24th of April, 1964, America experienced its first credible close encounter of the third kind. Officer Lonnie Zamora was driving along a quiet stretch of road skirting the edge of the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico.
What the hell was that?
Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of something strange in the sky. The road and set off for the desert following the craft. He caught sight of a shiny object, now landed about 200 yards away. As he looked over, he saw two figures in white coveralls close to what looked like a flying saucer. Suddenly, without warning, the craft took off and headed straight for him. And as quickly as it had arrived, it disappeared off into the distance at high speed. This statement by Lonnie Zamora is one of the most intriguing UFO reports on record. It made headline news at the time. Everyone acknowledged that Zamora was a first-class witness, a police officer, a man not prone to exaggeration. The Zamora case remains one of a handful of unexplained sightings in Project Blue Book. When investigators arrived at the scene, they found an impression in the soil surrounded by burnt brushwood. Zamora was so distraught that he insisted on seeing a priest before handing in his report. The US Air Force was under pressure to explain what had actually landed. But there is one man who claims he knows what Lonnie Zamora saw. Duke Gildenberg ran Cold War spy programs out of White Sands Missile Range and had access to top-secret flight logs at the time.
That very same day, we had a mission scheduled for the Surveyor unmanned spacecraft that was going to be attached to a small helicopter and then flown all around the range by contractors sampling lava and that kind of thing, which they might see on the moon. On board was the pilot, and then there was an engineer, and they were both in white coveralls. So to us, that that identified it almost perfectly. It's too much of a coincidence. Two guys in white coveralls. They were doing the mission anyway. And then the sampler, which left a print in the dirt that was identical to what it later left in the moon.
I'm not at all convinced by Gildenberg's explanation. Zamora was a trained police officer, and I'm sure would have known the difference between a helicopter and a flying saucer. To try and make sense of what Zamora saw, we need to go back to the U-2 spy plane and to an event that shook the world on May the 1st, 1960. When U-2 pilot Gary Powers was shot down over the Soviet Union, Cold War tensions intensified. The wreckage of his spy plane was put on public display in Moscow. This was a huge propaganda coup for Khrushchev, and it signaled the end of the U-2's covert life.
It was understood very early in the U-2 program that it wouldn't be able to fly safely over the most denied areas of the Soviet Union forever. Best it was given a few years. In fact, it flew operationally for just about 4 years, which was longer than anybody expected, before one of the aircraft was shot down. The CIA launched an effort to produce a more workable aircraft with similar or better performance, and one that would be so fast and so high flying that even the best missile technology that anybody could be looking at in those days would have a very hard time hitting it.
Richard Bissell was head of the CIA's overflight program between 1956 and 1960, set up to monitor the USSR at the height of the Cold War. He was the man who was given the job of replacing the U-2, and he had a radical idea about how to do it. We see here that he's urging his technical department to design a new aircraft for reconnaissance missions over Russia. According to Bissell, who had a very good grasp of the technological challenges, the optimal shape for that vehicle would be saucer-shaped.
The Avrocar, which appears for all the world to be a flying disc.
It wasn't just Bissell who had flying saucers on his mind. Just across the border, Avro, a Canadian-based company, had recruited talented British aerospace designer John Frost to work on a flying saucer. Frost was a visionary, and under his leadership, the company began experimenting with disc-shaped craft. Called the Avrocar, it was a handful to fly and could barely get off the ground, but it caught the eye of the United States Air Force. They bought all rights to the project, and then it simply disappeared. Nothing more was heard or seen of Avro's saucer designs for over 40 years. But flying discs did not die with the Avrocar. Buried in the depths of the US Air Force archives, I've discovered some blueprints which reveal something quite fantastic, a supersonic saucer. Called the Silverbug, it was truly revolutionary. The plans show in detail a multi-jet engine craft that boasted amazing maneuverability and speed. It's an intriguing thought that this concept may tie in with the work of the German scientists who brought saucer technology to the US at the close of the Second World War. I believe Silverbug could explain what Lonnie Zamora witnessed in the New Mexico desert in April 1964. His description of a silver disc-shaped object appears to fit the Silverbug profile. It's clear that a host of covert technologies were being developed by the Air Force during the 1960s. Some of the strange UFO sightings might be explained by activities at a secret base here in Nevada. So secret that according to the Pentagon, it still doesn't officially exist. From a defense journalist standpoint, it doesn't get any stranger than this. Just behind me there is Nellis Air Force Base, Nellis is at the southernmost tip of the Nellis Air Force Range, a closed-off area, totally barred to the public, that's about the size of Switzerland. And nestling within the Nellis Air Force Range is Area 51, the world's most secret Air Force base. When Richard Bissell of the CIA urged his designers to think out of the box, this is where their imaginations ran wild. It's the testing ground for the US Air Force's most secret technology. When the U-2's covert life ended, this is what Bissell's designers came up with. The Blackbird is the apex of aerospace technology. When the forerunner of this aircraft first flew, the CIA's A-12, in 1962, from Groom Lake, otherwise known as Area 51 in Nevada, its mission and the aircraft itself was super black. That is to say, it was a super classified aircraft. It's very easy to imagine how anyone catching a glimpse of this aircraft in 1962 might have mistaken it for a UFO. Everything about this aeroplane is strange. It's black, its shape is extraordinary, and its speed, of course, in excess of Mach 3, that's 3 times the speed of sound, would have made it one of the most extraordinary sights that anyone could have seen at that time. Many Blackbird missions were flown at the height of the Cold War. The plane flew at over 100,000 feet at the very edge of space. It was so fast that when it overflew the Soviet Union, it could simply outrun any missile attack. But it wasn't so much American spy planes that were worrying the Russians. There was something else in the skies that was causing them alarm. An incident over the small town of Petrozavodsk would trigger the largest study of UFOs on the face of the Earth. Russia's X-Files had begun. On September the 20th, 1977, high over the Russian town of Petrozavodsk, a group of soldiers were on routine maneuvers. Suddenly, a bright star appeared radiating pulsating beams of light. The object lingered over the town like a huge jellyfish. After a few minutes, it wrapped into a bright half-disk and shot off. Of the event reached the Kremlin, and Youri Andropov, head of the KGB, gave an extraordinary order that the entire Soviet army should watch the skies for unidentified flying objects. I'm in Russia, on my way to meet the two men, Colonel Boris Sokolov and Dr. Yuliy Platov, who were ordered by Andropov to coordinate the whole operation. Oh, Colonel Sokolov. Nick Cook.
Yuliy.
Hello.
Добрый день. Добрый день. Проходите. Thank you.
At that time, the army had a total of 7.5 million serving personnel, stationed across the whole of the Soviet Union, which comprised a sixth of the world land mass. The army controlled the monitoring of these abnormal events. In the beginning, these reports were numerous. Literally, every week there was someone who had seen a dish landing with somebody coming out of it. Even when a sighting was not considered sensitive, it was still stamped top secret.
Буквально каждую неделю кто-нибудь, так сказать, видел там.
The observations continued every night for 13 years. No other nation has conducted such a long and thorough research program into unidentified flying objects. But as Sokolov tells me, the evidence was inconclusive.
I would like to say that it is absolutely certain that in those 13 years there was not a single report of anybody's contact with aliens.
Без сомнения, большинство явлений...
Most of the sightings, which were taken by observers and thought to be something abnormal, were in fact, as our research has shown, connected to technical experiments by our own military.
Были связаны с технической деятельностью человечества. Газопылевой след продуктов сгорания.
And as Dr. Platov explains, even the Petrozavodsk incident, which led to Andropov's UFO surveillance operation, was nothing more than a secret missile launch.
Петрозаводского явления. Ракета...
That the strange lights and jellyfish-shaped object was in reality the burning rocket engine and its exhaust plume.
Основная часть наблюдателей располагалась вблизи Петрозаводска.
But not every sighting could be so easily dismissed.
Наблюдатель, глядя вот отсюда на эту картинку, он видит, как яркая звездочка.
Even though we could explain some of these sightings, there were many unexplained events which caused scientists to scratch their heads and which still remain unanswered today.
Физики, которые ответа так до сих пор нету.
For some, these inexplicable sightings fueled concerns that the United States military was developing a radical piece of aerospace technology, something that behaved and looked like a UFO that could fly undetected into Russian airspace. The Russian fears were well-founded. This is stealth, a quantum leap in aerospace technology. The Americans had built an invisible plane.
If you took one or two looks at that airplane and you saw how strange the shape was, it wouldn't take you very long to figure out that they were aiming at a very, very low level of radar cross-section. What was done with the first real stealth program was to produce something that had the radar signature of a small shotgun pellet or perhaps maybe a small bird.
My view is that it was advantageous for the Americans to keep up this kind of hype regarding UFOs. We guessed it was policy to conduct a campaign of misinformation as far as the general public was concerned.
Stealth was an enormous breakthrough, and nobody out in the wider world really believed it was possible. Nobody could even imagine that it was possible to do.
The Americans had won the technological race. Stealth was a decisive instrument in the Cold War. Secrecy was vital, and the US were able to hide the existence of stealth from Soviet surveillance for more than 10 years between 1977 and 1988. But stealth couldn't begin to explain the series of alleged alien encounters which were about to shock the American Southwest. The UFO story had come to ground in a very sinister fashion. This is New Mexico, an area that has witnessed UFO sightings since the 1940s. But in the early 70s, a series of horrific events took these sightings to another level, when aliens appeared to be attacking cattle. Ranchers began to find livestock with terrible injuries lying dead on their grazing plains.
The rectum had been partially removed. The eyes were bulging out. I was horrified at the thought of what could do this in broad daylight.
I really did believe something strange was going on. We had one up north where we believed the animal was paralyzed and was alive when it was being mutilated.
I'm on my way to meet Edmund Gomez, a cattle rancher from Dulce, New Mexico, a town close to Los Alamos, where the atomic bomb was developed. We met up and headed out to a desolate corner of his ranch. Where are we going? Where are you taking me to?
I'm taking you to our animal graveyard. Normally we would bury carcasses that would die from disease or from natural causes, but during the cattle mutilations that we had, we never buried any of the animals, so in case we ever needed any body parts, you know, in the future, especially the bones.
The mutilations themselves took place over quite a time period, didn't they?
Yes, they on our ranches from 1976 through 1982, approximately.
When you found a mutilated cow, typically what kind of wounds would you find on the animal?
The rectum had been cored out, the lower lip had been removed, and the reproductive tract also had been removed. The organs that were removed precisely without spilling of any blood, and it was very, very neatly done.
Many of the ranchers believed the cattle mutilations were the result of UFOs, that aliens were dissecting the animals for experimentation.
Usually when you find an animal that dies of a disease or natural causes, the scavengers will attack the animal and attack the fleshy parts that they can, you know, that are easy to tear into. And this was not torn flesh.
But for Gomez, there were other clues.
We saw this light kind of flying over our pastures, and all of a sudden it kind of just came to a standstill. It looked like it was saucer-shaped, but had two decks, and had two sets of lights on it, flashing one on top and one down towards the bottom. You know, when you look at them, you know, you think, well, gosh, that looks like the typical flying saucer. When all of a sudden the lights inside the cockpit of this vehicle went on, and when the lights went on, I could see the props of a chopper.
And as Gomez tells me, he has his own theories about the fate of the targeted animals.
They would put ropes or chains around the legs of the animal and lift them up and haul them off somewhere. Do their thing, come back, bring them back, and not lay them down, but drop them, because we found several animals that had broken legs, broken backs, broken hips, and so forth.
And why dump the cow, you know, leave the carcass here?
We felt that that whoever was doing this did it and brought it back and said, we're doing this and there's nothing you can do about it. There were a lot of consistencies with the way that they were harvesting these animals.
For Edmund Gomez, there are many unanswered questions. He wants the cattle mutilations, which put him and his family out of the ranching business, reinvestigated. Well, I think Gomez's hunch that this was from from the way the cows were mutilated, from the organs that were removed from the cows, it seems very clear that this was some kind of covert testing, covert monitoring program of some kind of contamination in that region. It also seems very clear that someone is trying to put in some kind of linkage between this mutilation activity and UFOs, trying to dress helicopters up, for instance, to make them look like UFOs in an area where people are very superstitious, very fearful of things they don't understand. So it's clear to me that some kind of disinformation campaign is going on, but the reality is whatever was going on up there has nothing to do with extraterrestrials or UFOs. In the alien encounters I have examined so far, military and defense technologies seem to be at the heart of what's going on. But parallel to these stories are other reports of more direct encounters between aliens and humans, which seem to be of a wholly different order. These are the chilling first-hand accounts of alien abduction. The most challenging aspect of the UFO phenomenon is alien abduction. Throughout the 80s and 90s, stories of abduction swept across the US. Over 2 million Americans claim to have been taken by aliens. These stories followed a pattern. Typically, abductees claimed they had been taken in their sleep to an alien craft, where they were subjected to invasive surgery. Samples were taken. Probes were implanted. Some victims reported they had been abducted not just once, but many times. I've come to meet Travis Walton. He was the first alien abductee of this epidemic, and his story, which was widely reported, had a powerful effect on the public imagination. I caught up with him near the Apache Sitgreaves Forest in Arizona, where the whole incident unfolded.
Well, there was a group of 7 of us men. We were working up in the mountains, in the woods. We had a tree cutting contract up there, and we just finished a long, hard day's work, and we were headed home. We'd worked late that night, so it was starting to get dark, and as we were driving down this rough track there, we saw light coming through the trees.
What the hell is that? Man, what the hell are you doing? Come back! Travis!
Back then, you know, I was a kind of a wild sort of a guy. You know, I was showing off, you know. It was stupid. The closer I got, you know, and it wasn't going anywhere, and I was, you know, thinking about how foolish it was for me to be doing this, but I was kind of showing off for the crew a little bit, and they were getting pretty excited and yelling at me to get back in the truck. When I got up to it and I was standing there looking up at it, the sound suddenly got louder and it started to move, and it was making this sort of a rocking motion. And right at that instant, something hit me. Next thing I knew, I was regaining consciousness, but I was in a lot of pain. I saw these forms over me, And when I finally got it into focus, I could see this creature looking at me, and I just flipped out. I looked around, there was 3 of them. The one that was closest to me, I tried to hit him. I could hardly move, and my arm felt real heavy, and I was weak. Somehow got the strength to get off of the table.
Several nights later, Travis Walton reappeared, dazed and confused.
I didn't know how much time had gone by. There's something in the conversation, made that apparent to them. He said, "Hey, feel your face," and I felt, and I had this, week's growth of beard, and I was just totally shocked by this. So you've been gone 5 days. I had enough trouble just dealing with the reality of this incredible thing that had happened to me. It was just so hard to explain what I'd been through, and there was nobody to relate to. And 29 years ago, there was nobody to turn to, and I was just on my own.
Travis's story seems incredible, but it's only one of many such tales. Does the weight of evidence add up to a believable pattern of abduction? Anthropologist Charles Ziegler has studied many abductee testimonies.
These people were not mentally impaired. Many of them were, in fact, highly trained. They believed these things. It gave them the same kind of satisfaction that religion gives other people. The notion that we're not alone, that there is some entity that's looking after us, that there's a better place waiting for us when we die.
The chief skeptic of all, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who investigated UFOs for the US military, also became a believer. There were just too many cases that baffled him during his military work. It was Hynek's interviews and expertise that formed the basis of the 1977 film, Close Encounters, directed by Steven Spielberg.
I think that we're all interested in having in the re-enchantment of the universe. We want to feel that there are transcendent things out there that we're not aware of and that bode good for the human race somehow. I think this is just a natural human feeling.
But what really fascinates me as a defense journalist is that you are as likely to find believers in UFOs among the higher reaches of the aerospace industry as you are in Hollywood. This is a report into future technology commissioned in 1968 by McDonnell Douglas, which I received via contact with connections to the company. It takes the existence of UFOs seriously. It recommends using UFOs and copying their design in order to make the next quantum leap into aerospace technology. Some UFOs may be extraterrestrial vehicles. They certainly have not been proven otherwise. The existence of extraterrestrial vehicles indicates vehicles can be built which would have capabilities quite useful to McDonnell Douglas Corporation. The report even suggested interviewing contactees to gather data. And if they were thinking that over 25 years ago, what advances might be on the horizon today? What I've learned during this journey is that UFOs have had a powerful impact on our real-world activities for more than 60 years. And they continue to inspire us today. I'm here in Seattle to meet someone who's built a device in the basement of his garage, indeed is flying it there, that he and others claim is able to do so by defying our current understanding of physics. As unlikely as it sounds, I'm wondering whether what I'm about to witness may just be our first small step towards the stars. This strange device is made of balsa wood and glue and covered in a layer of aluminium foil. It's connected to the mains electricity and is tethered to a device that steps up the power to over 50,000 volts. As the lifter's inventor, Tim Ventura, winds up the mains, the airframe buzzes with electrical activity. So Tim, tell me, why is this lifter demonstrating this levitational effect?
Well, there's an interaction that occurs between the corona wire, which runs around the top, and the foil underneath.
Yeah.
And there's a 3 to 4 centimeter air gap in between there, and literally a high voltage electric field occurring. Now, there's been some controversy. Is this an ion wind effect? Is it the high voltage literally taking air molecules with it and creating an upward thrust? Or is it something more?
Nobody knows for sure how the lifter flies, but one popular theory is that high voltage current flows between the wires, suspended on the top of the craft, through the air, down to the aluminium foil wrapped around the frame. The current literally drags air molecules down with it, creating a downforce called an ion wind, which provides the thrust needed to lift the airframe skywards.
This technology, not just the lifter, but this whole scope of technologies, is almost like looking at the internal combustion engine back in the 1800s. We're trying to take it and say, look, these are real technologies. They have the same flaws that any other technology does, but hopefully they can do things that other technologies can't.
So do you think what we're watching here could be the modest beginnings of a whole new industry?
Yeah, I think the lifter is literally sort of like the tricycle, and it may not end up becoming the technology that builds the starships of tomorrow, but it at least shows us that given the right circumstances, given the right power, it will work.
So what is the truth about UFOs? To me, the story of successive attempts to develop radically new forms of flight, conducted under the strictest secrecy, is inextricably bound up with our relationship with UFOs over the last 60 years. Whether it was Allied pilots buzzed by strange balls of fire in 1942, or the Roswell incident 5 years later, there is a strong case to be made that secret military technology offers a convincing explanation for many UFO stories. For me, what is so striking about Roswell is that it was the first good example of an officially sanctioned UFO disinformation exercise. It showed the CIA that UFOs could provide perfect cover for their Cold War activities. It didn't take much for the CIA to spin the extraterrestrial story into the hearts and minds of the American public. And once it was there, all manner of experimental technology could, if it was spotted, be put down to the UFO phenomenon. But there are some cases I just can't explain. The sightings of UFOs over Capitol Hill in 1952 remain baffling, and navigator Tom Hanley's aerial encounter is testimony to the possibility we are not alone. What is certain is that real-world UFOs, the man-made ones, continue to develop. In 2003, a series of sonic booms were heard exploding across California and Nevada. Something was in the sky that could be heard and felt, but not seen. Some informed observers, and I'm one of them, believe it was an aircraft traveling at several thousand miles per hour. A secret project known as Aurora. There is no trace of Aurora's physical existence, no evidence of government spending on its development or deployment. But there are tantalizing images that point to its existence. Pictures, for example, like this one. It shows a donut-shaped exhaust pattern, a sign perhaps that Aurora makes use of something called a pulse detonation wave engine. And it delivers a hell of a punch, easily enough power to drive an aircraft to 6 times the speed of sound. But perhaps the most intriguing are these images. This is a weather satellite image that shows a very interesting contrail originating out of Area 51 in Nevada and moving all the way across the United States, out over the Atlantic, on across Europe, and into Russia and China. Whatever it is, it's moving in excess of 8,000 miles an hour. If it is the contrail of a high-altitude hypersonic aircraft, in my book it's the best evidence yet that Aurora is real. And Aurora's flights will probably give birth to a new wave of UFO sightings. Because whether aliens exist or not, many of us want to believe in them. Perhaps the only way we will ever find out for sure is if we make the leap into deep space ourselves. That day may come sooner than we expect.
Civilization is rocked by the Earth's largest volcanic eruption and lost to legends. Now, teams of investigators use cutting-edge technology and reveal the hidden secrets to the most famous of all lost worlds. Atlantis, next, only on the History Channel.